Just as was just pointed out, Mr. Goodell, you have attract tens of millions of dollars from Americans who watch your games every week. You've got a large captive audience. Would you agree the NFL has a tremendous amount of power and ability to influence American culture?
Yes, Congressman, I think I just made that point. I agree with you.
I'm a little bit troubled by your embracement of what I'll call left woke anti-American propaganda, way exaggerating any amount of racism in America. Under your leadership, the NFL has perpetuated the narrative that America is a racist country, including the myth of systemic racism in policing. You've committed hundreds of millions of dollars to, quote, fight racism in America. You've kind of promoted the Black Lives Matter movement, and of course the heads of that movement were Marxists. They're kind of anti-family. I realize it's a diffuse organization, and not everybody believes in that, but nevertheless, the founders believed in that. The NFL is committed to leveraging the NFL network with its other media properties to place increased emphasis on raising awareness and promoting education of social justice issues of our fans. That's what you say. Mr. Goodell, studies show that when you control for crime rates, there is no systemic racism in policing. Mr. Goodell, could you use your opportunity to raise awareness among your fans about the fact that study after study shows that when controlling for variables such as crime rates, there is no significant relationship between a person's race and whether or not they'll be arrested or shot at by police? Do you think you could use your power to get that out there, given what you've done in the past?
Congressman, first, I make no apologies for fighting racism. We believe strongly that there's no place for racism and hatred in our society.
That's not the point.
Well, I'm just trying to clarify a point that I heard in your document, in your question. The second point to it is we have an incredibly strong relationship with law enforcement. We are supportive of the work that they do. We understand the difficult job that they have and the dangerous job they have. But we all want great policing. We want to make sure that the police are properly resourced and properly equipped. But more importantly, our work has been focused on how do we develop better relationships between the law enforcement and the communities. And personally, I've gone into some of those communities with law enforcement and done what we call ride-alongs. And in that context, you understand the gap that we have to fill between what law enforcement is faced with, how they do their jobs, and what the community expects from them. And I think more communication, more work to try to improve that relationship is not only going to improve policing, but I think it's going to improve our societies in general and our communities.
Mr. Goodell, study after study shows there is not systemic racism in our police departments. There is a narrative out there, for example, who to this day mislead the public as to what happened in Ferguson. The Black Lives Matter movement fanned the flames out there, even though Barack Obama's own Justice Department found that shooting was justified. And you have kind of piled on with the narrative that we have a fundamental problem. Will you do what you can to use your mouthpiece, given the damage I think you've created in the past, to straighten out the record with regard to racism in our police departments?
Well, Congressman, with all due respect, I think, again, we've been incredibly supportive of law enforcement, and we'll continue that. So
okay. I'll give you another question. I'll give you another question. Okay. This is on the internet, and you never know what you can believe on the internet. I look at the internet, and we see that you're making about $64 million a year. Not as an owner, not as somebody who's taking personal risk, not somebody who has to block or tackle or risk your body. To a certain extent, the NFL is profitable because they shake down cities, tell them we're gonna leave your city unless you build a big, hundreds of millions of dollars of stadium. Do you think it's appropriate, given the monopoly the NFL has, that you have no personal risk, either physical risk or financial risk in your job? Could you comment on that $64 million salary?
Congressman, I started as an intern nearly 40 years ago in the NFL, and I am very fortunate to have made a career of being at the NFL. It's an organization I'm proud of. I'm happy to have had the opportunities that I've had, and people have mentored me and given me those opportunities. My compensation is something that is determined with discretion from the ownership. They make that determination. I am very fortunate to be here in this job. I'm proud of it, and I wish I could say anything more to you that would make you more comfortable, but those are determinations that are made by the ownership.
Thank you. Thank you for the questions, Mr. Grothman. One thing I just wanted to clarify, the commissioner said that the difference between releasing the Miami Dolphins report and the Wilkinson investigation is that witnesses in the Miami Dolphins case did not request their identities to remain confidential. That is not correct. According to page 54 of the Dolphins report, it says witnesses, quote, specifically asked that their identities remain confidential. A few even seemed to fear potential retaliation for cooperating with our inquiry, and we honored their request, close quote. I'd now like to recognize